Hi, I'm Neha Ruch. I'm a mom of two in New York, and I run Mother Untitled, a platform empowering women on career breaks. And you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
My name is Abhay, and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Hi, everyone. On this episode of Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing, a conversation with the founder of Mother Untitled, Neha Ruch. Stay tuned. So a heartfelt thank you for listening to this and sharing it with your friends and family, for rating and reviewing it wherever you're listening, and for following Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing on social media. Now, let's talk about appreciating the pause. We don't savor it enough, and yet pauses and resets are elegantly and critically embedded into so many things. Spring or summer break, or a gap year from school, diastole in the cardiac cycle, and retreats for artists and in business. Now, these pauses are intentional downshifts designed for restorative energy activation. And the curation of thought and progress during that pause is in fact just as important to highlight as the surrounding before and after activities. Now, for many women, finding the personal, structural, and strategic support to recognize and amplify a pause for motherhood and parenting in almost any career journey is filled in 2023 with an incredible number of institutional and cultural obstacles. It's why I enjoyed sharing an important conversation with Neha Ruch, who's the founder of Mother Untitled and on a mission to update the perception of stay-at-home motherhood in America, infusing it with ambition, dignity, growth, and potential. Now, Neha immigrated from India to the United States with her family when she was 4 and grew up in Massachusetts. She spent a decade in brand strategy and consumer insights and received her MBA from Stanford before her own career pause. Neha established her independent media brand Mother Untitled in 2017 in the early days of her own motherhood journey as a digital destination for progressive, ambitious women who've opted to focus on motherhood for a life chapter. Her work to support and provide thought leadership are helping to offer lots of important substrate in catalyzing the needed reframing around identity, confidence, ambition, mentorship, and community for moms navigating through their own individual multiverses. Neha is currently authoring a forthcoming book called The Power Pause, and so it was great to catch up to talk about lessons learned in patience and acceptance, trust and stigma, and the gray zones that make each individual story so nonlinear. But we started out by chatting about the notion that we often live through as parents, in that the days are long, but the years are short. How does the phrase, or what is the phrase, "the days are long, but the years are short," mean for you?
As trite as they are, I do think they resonate. I think they help navigate the stages in every context of life, whether that be motherhood, whether that be partnership, whether that be business, that everything really is a phase and everything really is temporary. And you sort of have to do your best and make the best choice for right now. But this stage will inevitably pass. And I think that has always been my takeaway, because one day you do look back and everything makes sense.
I mean, for you, has it been something that you've had to, in some ways, not just learn, but synthesize and rapidly iterate on? I mean, we do that in different phases of work and business where we're just learning all the time and we're finding ways to, in fact, allow ourselves space and licensure and agency to continually improve. But parenting doesn't always, feel like that. And this whole, at least for us, it's been an important reminder to know that those days are long, but the years go by so fast.
And I think that I would add that children are the greatest teachers of that. And you can only really learn that by living it, right? And so, yes, short answer, it took watching the evolution from my anxiety around the transition to 2 children. I found that really rattling.
Yeah.
And someone to say to me, I know this feels hard right now, but I promise you, whatever you choose, however you slice up your hours, however you spend your time with both children, it will make this new dynamic is going to make you all who you're meant to be.
Yeah.
And I remember coming out the other side of that stage, you know, a year later, we were squashed together 2 years later in the pandemic, and thinking, like, I got this now. Like,
Yeah.
wow, that moment feels so long ago. And all those things that felt so heavy feel lighter.
Mm.
And that dynamic really did make us who we were meant to be. And I think sometimes we have these moments that feel really hard. And when we move through them, whether that be a specific dynamic change in the family system, or that be a nuanced challenge with one child, or that be a personal challenge you're having with your career and identity and motherhood, it takes moving through that one example, coming out the other side, looking back to really feel like you're building that muscle and skill of being able to reflect on that process.
When you embarked on this Mother Untitled journey, you know, I'm imagining a big focus was on life in the gray zones, right? Of trying to figure out, okay, how do I integrate? How do I balance? How do I manage? And focusing almost in some ways kind of how to optimize things, optimize parenting, career pausing. You know, in the 6 years now since you've been doing this, do you think it's become any easier, or perhaps spotlit, is that a word? Or amplified to embrace and even share this gray area, particularly as we've evolved through the pandemic?
Yes. When I started, I had my son on New Year's Day in 2016, and I had graduated business school, you know, 2 years before that. I had a pretty senior role in a marketing firm, and the expectations were high, you know.
Sure.
By all accounts, I had the dream job, and yet when I had him, I remember sitting in a rocking chair saying, like, this is the peace, peace I've been longing for. And it's not to say that those first months were so, you know, it's not, I had mastitis, I wasn't sleeping like everyone else wasn't sleeping. However, there was a sense of belonging and comfort in my own skin and purpose that did quiet down a lot of the noise I'd been seeking to quiet down. So for me, that moment of clarity was, I want to lean into this feeling, and I trust that this will actually make me better for my career down the line.
Sure.
And I didn't face a lot of that doubt. I've had a lot of clarity around that. However, when I made that choice, that was around the Lean In movement. Lean In was the rallying cry at the moment. It had done wonders for women in the workforce. However, what it did was it sort of placed shame on a choice that was more about family life and slowing down and downshifting career. And, you know, what I experienced was what a lot of women stepping into a career pause or downshift, or a lot of men feel, is just a lot of stigma around what it means to be ambitious, what it means to be modern. And that I launched Mother Untitled because I was looking around in media and content and saying there's no representation of the gray area, that there's a vast in between this sort of traditional trope of stay-at-home mother and this, you know, new quote unquote hustle culture. There's this vast in between that we're all existing in. And I really wanted to shine a light on that, but it really was our platform at the beginning, and a lot of noise around the juggling and the hustling. And however, the pandemic came along, and I think it really challenged everyone to re-examine what work and family and life mean and how it all fits together or doesn't. And so, yes, in 2021 was when I really said, like, it's time to dial this effort and movement up, because the time was now culturally. And it was that sort of perfect storm where the spotlight on this conversation was real.
And I mean, the zeitgeist definitely changed, I would say, is very palpable in that way by necessity and sort of being that, you know, if you will, kind of spark for invention. Was there something, as you found an accelerator in the pandemic, so to speak, where it did become a little bit more embraced naturally, and then also as a byproduct of it, did you find that, in fact, there's a much more of an embrace of the additive value of letting go. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. It does, because I think when we let go, when we often talk, Mother Untitled comes from letting go of the titles, like stay at home and working, and existing in between. But it's also about, and mostly about, letting go of the career titles that define us and figuring out what we're really about and what's true and what's of importance right now. And I think that on a macro level, that was the understanding that culture got to, is that maybe work has defined us for too long. And maybe that by letting go of some of the pressures or re-examining what that relationship to work is, we unlock a new clarity about who we are, new interests, new values. And I do think that movement is one part sort of technical and logistical. How do we negotiate flexible work, and what are new policies to support families? And there's this more soulful discovery period that this culture is reckoning with.
Because you spoke a little bit about the shame part, and I know that a lot of people grapple with both the workplace self-esteem and even empowerment piece independent of motherhood. Women certainly face a lot of obstacles in the workforce, but now add on parenting and being a family member, not just caring for young ones, but caring for elderly parents or sick individuals. How much of entering this space have you learned in some ways? How much has it taught you about the sort of systemic undercurrent of that lack of empowerment, that lack of kind of self-esteem for women in the American workforce? I mean, it's shockingly and almost alarmingly, so pervasive.
The conditioning starts early, right? There's a real fear. The shame goes hand in hand with the fear of, if we step away, we lose our place.
Yeah.
And that really starts from early on in our careers, that we're taught that those places are sacred, they're hard fought, and it comes from a scarcity mindset, right?
Yeah.
And I think women, and it sort of dates back. It really dates back to the 1970s, and I think the feminist movement was such a gift to women. And what it did was it really said, we needed a little bit to distance ourselves from the women at home. So we created this power chasm, right? We said, if you're focusing on family life, that's traditional. And then the flip side of that was the media then perpetuated that into quote unquote mommy wars. So we sort of created these chasms between women that do us a disservice.
Yeah.
Then we taught women that there's only room for one or a few. So it created a competitive culture. It created a culture where women really operated from a place of, if we're not going above and beyond, we're going to lose our footing.
Right.
And I think that we are all rewiring that. And I think a lot of the shame comes, again, hand in hand with the fear of, if I'm stepping away from ambition as it's been defined as just continuing on this path, then I am in some way turning my back on feminism. I'm turning my back on what it means to be a modern woman. I'm wasting all of the things I've done, as opposed to, the much healthier mindset that we're trying to perpetuate, which is, we all make choices to, refocus and recalibrate our priority set at any given time, and we can shift back, and it's a long game.
Yeah.
And there's room.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, we'll come back to our conversation with Neha Ruch. Stay tuned. Conversation. It's the antidote to apathy and the catalyst for relationships. I'm Abhay, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians, so everyone can say, trust me, I know what I'm doing. New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hello everyone, my name is Tam France, and you are listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Welcome back to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's rejoin our conversation with the founder of Mother Untitled, Neha Ruch. You know, speaking of conditioning and ambition and how you sort of learn that, and by the way, I love how you put that in that, there's a lot there to unpack because of the history behind this, and it is interwoven with feminism as a movement and how it sort of blends into the workplace. I'm curious about this idea of, for you personally, and I'm so fascinated sometimes to learn about how this weaves in as far as a conditioning for even individuals and leaders like yourself. I'm wondering, what did you learn about ambition and parenting from your own mom? And in that matter, sort of being in an Indian American household growing up.
I'm so glad you asked that because I don't always get a chance to talk about it. It does come up in the book as the book comes to life and we're shaping that. But
Yeah.
for now, I'll share that my parents immigrated here when I was, just shy of 4 years old. We moved to a tiny town outside of Boston. My father was really in the very intense early stages of building his company. And what I saw was my mother stepping in to really do everything else. I mean, she was the rock. And I think why I was lucky to develop a self-trust in this role of stay-at-home motherhood, if we want to call it that, or this role of shifting to focus on family life, was that my father held her with the utmost respect. I mean, he really credited everything he was capable of doing to her. And meanwhile, I experienced a parent who was, the first to take me to Concord 5 and 10 and get craft supplies and was just this beacon of creativity. And, we were sitting on Saturdays, my father would have a lot of the team over, and she was sort of, in my view, sort of seamlessly blending from his world into mine, where she was rolling out bubble wrap so that she could keep me occupied in the kitchen, right? And I found this really to be the vision both of empowerment, but also creativity and connection. She built some really close friendships. She was volunteering in the school system. She eventually transitioned back to part-time work when I was 12 or 13, and built a community that way. And she, to me, was someone who was not only his rock, but my rock. And we felt like a really respectful unit.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I decided to take my own pause that I heard her feedback and concern about this. And I think she was so proud of my career path to date. Right. And I think she had to reconcile her own feelings around, would I be respected? She wanted her own child to have what she didn't, but in my view, she'd had everything. So we had to really reconcile our own vision and realities.
Yeah.
And
was that a surprise, by the way, for you?
Yes, because I look back and I feel her joy, and I did not see the doubts she was experiencing, the shame she was feeling, the disrespect she, had internalized, even if it wasn't coming from my father, of not being financially contributing at that time. I saw her contribution as so significant. I saw her contribution as valued. So yes, as a child, I was viewing her experience so differently. And it wasn't until she was explaining to me her concerns for me that I could understand the duality of that experience.
In that way, and this is not unique to Indian Americans, certainly, children of immigrant families, but was there, and by the way, have you talked to your dad about that? And sort of like how that resonates now for him, now seeing your career, both be on pause, blossom, and your parenting blossom as well?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's two things I would say. Yes, my mother was concerned about me stepping away because she wanted me to have something of my own. And when I became a mother, when she watched it, she would say that's the thing that makes her the proudest of me.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because she's holding that duality, and my father really echoes that. I think he has a different view, which is rooted in a lot of trust around what I'm capable of, what our family's capable of. And I think he wanted for me, as having worked sort of tirelessly, he wanted for me a life that did feel free.
Yeah.
And so I think he enjoys watching me lean into motherhood and get joy from motherhood and watching it unfold into this new creative, powerful pursuit, and now advising me in that. He really taught me to trust the process. But I always say that when people say trust the process, what they're really saying is trust yourself, right?
Yeah,
and I think
for sure.
That foundational level of self-trust really came from him.
You know, when you talk to other women of color, women and moms who are from immigrant families, sort of similar to you, when you sort of hear their stories of how their families grappled with this in generations past, and then also talk to their parents and grandparents who are supporting moms in this phase of life, what do you often find are some of the blind spots that you tend to notice when they're telling you these stories?
You know, a lot of it comes from that same fear and scarcity that we talked about.
Yeah.
You know, with women, you know, a lot of it is similar, which is in marginalized communities. So whether it's women, whether it's in immigrant populations, there's a lot of this feeling of, we've done all of this to get this far, we can't lose our place.
Yeah.
And I think where the gap often happens generationally is that as a generation, we're operating in different circumstance, right? So let's, for the sake of this conversation, take myself and my mother, right?
Yeah.
My mother didn't have a cell phone, didn't have computers available. She was getting on a school bus to go with me to volunteer, which was really her only opportunity to learn and grow, and she found it.
Yeah.
I have Instagram and Twitter and Masterclass and Canva, all of these digital flex jobs boards, online mom
Right.
communities available for constant learning and communication. And I think as generations, what we're sort of, and then add to that generations with immigrant families, we're reconciling two things. We're reconciling, we have a different opportunity set and a different mindset, and we have different tools and job marketplaces available to us that change the dynamic and
Yeah.
open up the dynamic between work and life in a much bigger way.
You know, that sort of leads to two thoughts immediately for me. The first one, and then I'll save the second one for a second, but the first one is, you know, in that same spirit of recognizing the differences and the gaps, and in some ways in your work now, sort of helping people to identify what the blind spots are so that they can actually get to that sweet spot. What did you have to learn yourself about sort of patience and almost and acceptance, for that matter?
I think the largest challenge personally was this idea of recalibrating often, right? Knowing that whatever we were deciding for a season or a stage of life wasn't going to be how it's going to be the next year, right? And how that relates to ambition and motherhood is that when I chose to pause my career and downshift my career, I didn't pause my goals and my creativity in my brain. So I was still holding on to creative pursuits and big ideas alongside family life.
Right.
And so for me, that took shape I came to it quickly with Mother Untitled because I was living this new narrative and I wanted to put this new narrative out there. And I just was looking at culture and saying, this needs to be big. This needs to be now. Except I had two very little children at home. And there's a great irony in building a platform to empower women on career pauses when you're on a career pause.
Right.
And what I had to learn is that, your pace doesn't outweigh your purpose, right?
Yeah.
So there were seasons of moving slowly, and I had to accept that.
Mm.
And I had to accept that timing will work in my favor. And it did. I couldn't have seen that. In 2019, I was adjusting to two children from the year prior. And I just felt like, oh, I was on to something. And now I have to basically just keep the lights on and just keep this moving.
Right.
And then 2020, I came in and I was like, this is going to be my year. And obviously that was, not my year, not anyone's year. But it all worked, because when we came out of that moment, culture was ready for the conversation I wanted to have.
Yeah.
And that timing did work, and my children were school age, and suddenly I had new time available to me that I didn't have 3 years before. So,
Sure.
I think understanding that it will shift, and that you just have to sometimes keep moving in the direction that feels right for right now.
Yeah.
And you get to revisit and recalibrate often.
The second thing that comes up sort of speaks back to, building the platform. And, someone who has now deep expertise with this, is it really hard to craft a brand around something that is, for that matter, so different in pace and purpose for each individual parent, and so gray and so individualized and so personally unique? How has that felt in trying to put this all under sort of one platform, one tent?
I think in one way it is really gray, and in another way, I've really stayed precise on my niche. I
Yeah.
think you can't be everything to everyone. While I am really open and about the fact that there is no one right choice for any family, whether you choose to work out of the home, work in the home, exist in between. And those messages can speak to allow me to be able to operate with warmth and openness with a lot of different women. The platform itself is very specific to women choosing to pause or downshift, right?
Right.
Because that's a very specific choice. So the communities that we really cater to, both in them that I speak to with the messages on social, but then, with the support and resources we have in place on site, is really to women who are in that pause, or in that decision point, or in that moment of starting to hold, small projects or businesses or freelance work alongside. So
Sure.
that's really it. I think staying specific to that has been really powerful. It didn't always feel that way, because there was
Yeah.
much more excitement for sort of the traditional working out of the home parent.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is that in that specific niche, there's all sorts of nuance, right? There's
Right.
still a million different permutations of what that woman looks like. However, that you can sort of figure out, these are the moments that matter for them. This is the moment that they're struggling with identity and reconciling how to answer that question, what do you do?
Right.
For the first time. Or this is the moment that they're feeling guilty about bringing on a babysitter for a
Yeah.
few hours because they think that they're the lead parent, or they feel like a dependent in their relationship, when really I would challenge them to think of them as an interdependent organization, right? They're providing
Yeah.
unpaid labor, their partner. So you sort of identify what these moments are and what women need.
Yeah.
And how you can intersect them at those moments that matter. And it's not so different from building a retail brand.
Yeah.
A same thing. How do we create a meaningful experience at the moment that matters, and identifying really what those are.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, we'll come back to our conversation with the founder of Mother Untitled, Neha Ruch. Stay tuned. Every story told is a lesson learned, and every lesson learned is a story waiting to be told. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians so everyone can say, trust me, I know what I'm doing. New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hi, this is Madhuri Dixit, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing with Abhay Dandekar.
Hi there, I'm Abhay Dandekar, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's rejoin our conversation now with Neha Ruch. And when you've thought about this from the employer side, or even when you look at it from people in positions of power and leadership, and those who are able to kind of bend the structure of the workforce a little bit, what do you think it takes to reimagine a woman's career and pausing as something that is quite normalized, and that women's careers and their life as parents are not linear, and that there are lots of individual contours and shapes to this?
So I've often said that the employers and the HR managers who are sitting across that desk when a woman enters after however long of a pause, whether that's, call it an average of 4 years,
Yeah.
To ask them about their portfolio, not
Yeah.
their career ladder, right? So like they're really invited to speak to the range of experiences and growth that have, in addition to their career experience prior, led them to this role and this opportunity and make
Right.
them uniquely. And I think for hiring managers and companies, it's going to take the willingness to accept that there is still growth possible, and a willingness to see new experiences added, whether that's an online class they took or a project or a volunteering experience they did in the PTA, and a flexibility to what
Right.
constitutes experience, because
Yeah.
experience doesn't always have to be traditionally in the paid workforce. I would challenge that I candidly grew more in the last 7 years than I did in the decade and the business school degree prior. And mostly because it was, children require a different level of leadership training.
Mm.
And when you leave the traditional workforce, you open your brain and your
Right.
network to new opportunities, new ways of thinking, really new perspectives.
Yeah.
I think perpetuating those conversations, and I would just add one thing, I think it's also on leaders in companies to be honest about their own pauses and shifts.
Sure.
Because it's only going to, I think for so long we've been encouraged to cover those up, right? Gloss over them.
Yeah.
I think we have a real opportunity now for men and women to start owning that more boldly so that it does become a normal part of the career path.
I think you and I have something in common in that we certainly interface with moms, parents of so many different generations and ages now. Do you have a real optimism about this, particularly as there's a new democratization of what ambition means, what a career diversity means for a Gen Z population, for the next generation and beyond that? Seems like things are getting more fluid, a lot more momentum behind this. Is there a real strength right now in kind of building that narrative?
There is. It has changed so radically, even in the last 1 year. And part of that is, when you hear leaders like Serena Williams, right? Or
Right.
Jacinda Ardern, you're seeing these icons of ambition say out loud that they're open to evolution, and it makes this conversation go mainstream.
Yeah.
Combined with the change in the economy that is challenging businesses to rethink. I think where we are still tasked as a nation is figuring out how to put in place policies that actually
Right.
align with the cultural shift that's happening.
And in that, so because particularly in immigrant-based cultures and, cultures where there's lots of tethers like ours back in India or South Asia and, living here in the United States, maybe you can speak a little bit to the role that spouses and partners and friends and family members, and even kids for that matter, play in helping realize the potential of this pause and home-based parenting, home-based work, that flexibility that's kind of needed for women.
Hmm. I think that partners probably are the most powerful ally in a two-parent household, right?
Yeah.
Because one, obviously, it takes a degree in most families of financial planning. So I think having a conversation up front and throughout about what is the unique value we're each contributing? Why
Yeah.
is this important to our family? And I think aligning on that allows women or men, depending on who's pausing, to step into this stage of life with confidence and feeling like it is an interdependent organization. And I think in
Right.
being able to do that, then we're able to navigate the next step, which is embracing the stage of life with more ease and more room. Then we're more able to invest in a little bit of childcare, to volunteer or to do flex work or to learn and grow in other, non-traditional ways. And we're able to invest in everyone's mental health
Yeah.
and development in a way that supports both partners stay whole and healthy. So now you have a family system that's whole and healthy. You have a woman, if she's choosing to pause, remain connected and creative so that when and if she wants to transition back, she's more able to do so, right? And it all starts with really recognizing within the home that both parents are contributing.
Yeah.
And I think that we have another opportunity right now, which is to not assume that the parent who has flexibility also is the one who has to show up and do all the things, right?
Sure.
The parent who works out of the home actually these days can carve out their own boundaries so that they're the ones volunteering in the school system and
Right.
they are the ones doing drop off and pick up where possible. And I think we should reimagine both roles, whether there's a lead parent working more home in the home and there's a parent working out of the home, making asks of one another, not just for respect, but also contributions on
Sure.
both sides
Yeah.
is important.
I'm curious. We were just talking about kind of visits to India. When you talk to women or your family members in India and you share with them a little bit about your work, what's their usual reaction?
It's the exact same as we have here. And it's such an international concept. And my husband's family's in Israel. And I
Yeah.
remember when I first launched Mother Untitled, I was with his cousins there, and they had this same exact feeling of
Yeah.
gratitude for being seen and for being validated for their contributions, but also being seen and recognized for being whole people,
Right.
who are still intellectual, who are still ambitious, who are still interested in what might come next. Because I
Yeah.
think that's the flaw. I think it's one thing to recognize the value of unpaid labor, but it's another thing to see that parent as still being part of the workforce, as still being an interesting part of society. And that's where we need to sort of infuse a new level of respect for the dimensions of what this role includes.
I read one of your op-eds that you wrote earlier this year about an experiment where you dressed differently at school drop-off and how the icebreaker questions changed based upon what you were wearing. And it was I thought that was the coolest thing, by the way. And you also talked about why it's so important to generate curiosity about, say, the complete picture of a mother. So I wanted to ask you now, what elements of your own life as a mom, as a professional, are still being discovered, whether that's challenging or opportunistic? What are you still learning?
What am I not learning? I think what I've learned is perspective. And what I'm still learning is how to bring a lot of the peace and calm that I was able to cultivate in family life and my career pause and bring that back into the workforce, right? I think transitions, no matter what, are challenging. And now going back into more work out of the home, I'm learning how to take a lot of the skills and the perspective back.
Yeah.
I think as a mother, I'm always still working on trusting that it will all be okay. And if these children know that they are safe and they are loved and we let them be exactly who they are meant to be, we will be okay. But I think that fear of wanting life to be easier for your children. It's, we talked about that in the context of my own mother, and I relate to it.
Yeah.
I relate to it very much so. And I think letting go of that fear and operating from a place of joy, so that's what my kids feel and remember. I think that's an ongoing journey.
We're grateful for all that you're doing, and that you're not only operating from a place of joy, but you're helping others hopefully operate more from that place of joy. Neha, thank you so much for such a terrific conversation, and I hope we can do it again at some point.
I would love that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Neha. And again, please take a moment, if you're enjoying Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing, to pass along our podcast to a friend or family member, or share a kind rating or review wherever you're listening. Till next time, I'm Abhay Dandekar.